The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. My hands trembled as I opened it, reading the words that would bring me face to face with the family I hadn't seen in 7 years. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Emma Catherine Anderson. My sister's wedding. Of course it would be perfect, elaborate, everything she ever dreamed of. Emma had always been the golden child, while I was the disappointment, the one who dared to choose a different path. My name is Olivia Anderson, and at 32, I was being summoned home for the first time since my parents had cut me off for refusing to follow their carefully laid plans for my life. The last time I'd seen them, my father had called me ungrateful. My mother had cried about the shame I brought to the family, and Emma had watched silently as they threw me out. Now here I was, standing in front of my childhood home, the sprawling mansion that had felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The gardens were immaculate as ever, roses blooming in precise rows, everything controlled and perfect, just how my mother liked it. Olivia, my mother's voice cut through the air as she opened the door. No hug, no warm welcome, just that familiar critical gaze. You're late. I checked my watch. I was actually 5 minutes early, but there was no point arguing. Some things never changed. Hello, Mother, I said, forcing a smile. It's been a long time. She ushered me inside, her heels clicking against the marble floors. Yes, well, that was your choice, wasn't it? But Emma insisted you be here for her wedding. Though I must say, your appearance isn't quite what we'd hoped for. I glanced down at my designer suit, worth more than most people's monthly salary. But of course, it wasn't the conservative dress she preferred me in 7 years ago. Now, she continued, leading me to the kitchen where caterers were bustling about. You'll be helping with the arrangements, making sure everything runs smoothly, helping the staff, that sort of thing. The wedding needs to be perfect. I stared at her, the reality of the situation sinking in. They hadn't invited me as a guest. They wanted me to be the help. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Whatever Emma needs. My mother nodded, satisfied with my compliance. Good. At least you can be useful. Emma will be down shortly. She's been so busy with the wedding plans. Her fiancé Thomas comes from an excellent family, you know. A merger between the companies is already in discussion. Of course it was. Everything in this family had always been about business, appearances, and social climbing. That's why they've been so furious when I'd refused to marry the son of one of my father's business partners 7 years ago. Instead, I'd walked away from their money, their connections, their suffocating expectations. What they didn't know was how that decision had changed my life. They had no idea that the small tech startup I'd joined back then had grown into one of the most successful companies in the country. They didn't know that I now owned 3 tech firms, that my net worth was more than triple what my father's company was worth. I kept my success quiet, changing my last name professionally to avoid the connection. As far as they knew, I was still the rebellious daughter who'd thrown away her future for nothing. Emma descended the grand staircase like a princess, just as she had when we were children. At 28, she looked exactly like the society bride our mother had always wanted. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile. Liv, she exclaimed, embracing me with practiced warmth. I'm so glad you came. Everything has to be just right for the wedding. Congratulations, I said, hugging her back. Thomas must be special. Her smile faltered for just a moment. Oh, he's perfect. Daddy says the merger will secure the company's future, and his family is so well connected. Some things really never did change. I thought about warning her, telling her what it felt like to live your life for other people's expectations. But I could see in her eyes that she'd already accepted her role, just as she had when we were young. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night, my mother interrupted. You'll need to be here early to help set up. And please try to dress appropriately. I nodded, already planning what I would wear. Not the conservative dress she wanted, but something that would make it clear I wasn't the same person they'd thrown out 7 years ago. As I drove back to my hotel that evening, I thought about how different my life was now. My penthouse apartment in New York, my successful companies, the respect I'd earned on my own terms. Tomorrow, they'd see glimpses of it, whether they were ready or not. The real question was I ready for them to know the truth? The rehearsal dinner was everything I expected. Elaborate flower arrangements, crystal glasses, and enough tension to suffocate an elephant. I arrived early as instructed, wearing a channel dress that cost more than my mother's entire wardrobe. The look on her face when I walked in was almost worth the price. That's hardly appropriate for kitchen staff, she sniffed, eyeing my dress with disapproval. I'm not kitchen staff, Mother, I replied calmly. I'm your daughter. My father appeared then, his presence still commanding enough to make the room feel smaller. Olivia, he said, his voice clipped. I trust to be discreet about your situation. We don't meet questions from Thomas's family. I smiled, remembering the meeting I'd had with Thomas's father just last month. He didn't know I was Emma's sister. Few people connected Olivia Anderson with Olivia Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Tech. But he'd certainly been eager to discuss potential partnerships with my companies. Don't worry, Dad, I said. I won't embarrass you. The evening progressed like a carefully choreographed dance. Emma played her part perfectly, laughing at all the right moments, touching Thomas's arm with just the right amount of affection. But I caught the moments when her smile slipped, when she thought no one was watching. During dinner, I overheard Thomas's father talking business with my father. The merger will save Anderson Industries, he was saying. You're lucky Emma's so accommodating. My blood boiled. They were using my sister as a pawn in their business games, just as they tried to use me. The difference was, I'd escaped. Later that night, Emma found me in the kitchen where I was supposedly helping with cleanup. You look different, Liv, she said softly. Happier. I am, I replied. You could be too, you know. You don't have to go through with this. She twisted her engagement ring nervously. It's not that simple. The company's struggling. Dad needs this merger. And what about what you need? I asked. I need to not disappoint them like you did, she snapped, then immediately looked regretful. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said. But you're wrong about one thing. I didn't disappoint them. I disappointed their expectations. There's a difference. The next morning, I had breakfast with Thomas's father at his request. He still had no idea who I really was. Ms. Reynolds, he said, I've been hoping to discuss a potential acquisition. Your tech companies would be a valuable addition to our portfolio. I sipped my coffee, enjoying the irony. That's interesting, I said. I heard you were already planning a merger with Anderson Industries. He waved dismissively. That old dinosaur? We'll strip it for parts once the merger's complete. Henry Anderson doesn't know it yet, but his company won't exist in 6 months. That's why this wedding is so important. My hand tightened around my coffee cup. And Emma? Does she know this? He laughed. The girl? She's just happy to be marrying into our family. Women like her are easily managed. I stood up, my decision made. Mr. Harrison, I should introduce myself properly. I'm Olivia Anderson, Emma's sister, and I think we need to have a very different conversation. The color drained from his face as recognition dawned. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of our conversation. Now, I said, let's talk about what's really going to happen. By that afternoon, news of the canceled merger was spreading through both families like wildfire. Emma found me in the garden, her face a mix of confusion and relief. What did you do? She asked. I handed her the recording. I showed you who Thomas's family really is, I said. The rest is up to you. She listened, her hands shaking. When it was finished, she took off her engagement ring and placed it on the garden table. They're going to be furious, she whispered. Probably, I agreed. But you know what? Sometimes fury is better than a lifetime of regret. That evening, as chaos erupted in both households, I sat in my hotel room and made a phone call that would change everything. My father's company might be struggling, but it wasn't beyond saving, not if it had the right partner. It was time to show my family exactly who I'd become. The morning of Emma's would-be wedding dawned bright and clear. Instead of wedding preparations, both families were in crisis mode. I walked into my father's study, where he sat with his head in his hands, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The company's ruined, he muttered without looking up. Everything I built. Not necessarily, I said, placing a folder on his desk. I have a proposal. He opened it, his eyes widening as he read. Reynolds Tech wants to partner with us. But how? Why would Olivia Reynolds? Because I am Olivia Reynolds, I said quietly. I changed my name when I started my company. I didn't want any connections to the family fortune. I needed to prove I could do it on my own. He stared at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. You're the CEO of Reynolds Tech? I nodded. 3 companies actually, and I'm offering to save Anderson Industries, not through a merger, but a genuine partnership. We'll modernize your infrastructure, integrate new technologies, and create something stronger together. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. After everything. Because you're my family, I said. And because I want to prove that success doesn't have to come at the cost of someone else's happiness. Emma found me later in the garden, where workers were dismantling the wedding decorations. Is it true? She asked. About your companies? Yes, I said. And you know what? I built them by following my own path, not someone else's expectations. She sat beside me, tears in her eyes. I've been so afraid of disappointing them that I almost ruined my life. I took her hand. It's not too late to find your own way. My mother was the last to come around. She found me in the kitchen, where I was supposed to have been helping with the wedding, and stood awkwardly in the doorway. Why did you tell us? She asked. Would you have believed me? I countered. Or would you have seen it as another way I was defying your plans? She flinched. I was wrong, Olivia. About so many things. The partnership between Reynolds Tech and Anderson Industries was announced the following week. The business world was shocked to discover that Olivia Reynolds and Olivia Anderson were the same person, but the story only added to my reputation. Emma decided to take some time to figure out what she really wanted. She moved to New York, started therapy, and eventually discovered her own passion for environmental law. Our parents struggled with the changes at first, but seeing both their daughters successful and genuinely happy began to shift their perspective. A year later, we all gathered for another family event, the opening of the Anderson Reynolds Innovation Center. As I cut the ribbon, I caught my father's eye. He nodded, just slightly, but in that nod was everything we'd never been able to say. I'm proud of you, he told me later, not because of your success, but because you had the courage to be yourself. My mother, standing nearby, added softly, we should have seen it sooner. That evening, I stood in my old bedroom, now a guest room, looking out at the garden where I'd spent so many hours dreaming of escape. Emma joined me, looking relaxed and confident in a way she never had before. You know what's funny, she said. They thought making you help with my wedding was a punishment, but it gave you exactly the opportunity you needed to save us all. I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person you were meant to be. Now, at family dinners, there are no more discussions of arranged marriages or business mergers. Instead, we talk about dreams and possibilities, about building things that matter. My parents are learning, slowly but surely, that true success isn't measured by social status or bank accounts, but by the courage to live authentically. And me, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, successful on my own terms, helping others find their path, and finally, truly part of a family that sees me for who I am. Sometimes I think about that wedding invitation, about how they tried to diminish me by making me the help. They had no idea they were giving me the perfect stage to show them exactly who I'd become. But more importantly, they had no idea that their attempt to humble me would lead to healing wounds that have festered for years. Sometimes the best endings come from the most unexpected beginnings.